Right, right.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to today's session. We had a wonderful session yesterday, which went for almost 2 hours, and that was that was really good to see that there was so much of engagement, so many questions were asked yesterday. We are back with this week's second session, the webinar on determination of compensation for actionable wrongs. The session would be taken care by Dr. Gopal Rasa, who is ADJ and faculty member at Chennai Digital Academy. As you all know, how this training session will go, how this webinar will go. The question will be asked and we will ask, and then accordingly we can just address it one by one. Without any further ado, I would just request Gopal Rasa to something about
Chetan ji, good morning. Chetan ji, there is a disturbance in the voice. Hello? Hello? Hello?
So, in my voice, sir?
Yes, yes. There is a lot of disturbance.
Yes, sir, I can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, okay. Am I
So
audible?
can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
So we can hear you as well, sir.
Right, right, right. Good morning, everyone.
So you
Today,
can start session because we can hear you. It might be disturbance from my side.
okay, okay, Chetan ji, okay.
So you can hear.
Good morning, everyone. Today we will discuss the topic regarding this determination of the compensation for actionable wrongs. Sir, I would like to share one thing, that here we are sitting as a law student and we will discuss the gray areas and the legal aspects of this topic, that is the actionable wrongs, and how to calculate the compensation regarding the actionable wrong. I have learned so many things from my seniors, and my seniors might be listening to me. And with due regards, sir, it's my humble request that I'm not here to teach anything, but we will discuss the common problems faced while we work in the subordinate courts, and while we determine the compensation in actionable wrong cases. Now, these types of cases are basically belongs to the category of tort cases. Under this category, I have segmented this topic basically in four parts. First part, I'll discuss what type of suits, what types of actions are taken for the determination of the compensation, and what are the ingredients for filing the cases or the petitions for seeking the compensation. Second would be the factors. What are the factors relevant for determination of the compensation? Third is the legal aspects regarding the compensation. And fourth is how to calculate the compensation while uh, taking up the matters pertaining to these actionable wrongs. We know that the actionable wrong basically is any action which is prejudicial to the legal rights of the we can say that is the complainants, and due to the infringement of the right, it is a proportionate duty of the other party to protect the right of the other party, and if there is any violation, then he is liable for criminal action, maybe it is civil also, and he is also liable for the damages also. Now, generally, when we deal with these matters, we pass simple order while calculating the compensation in certain category of cases that this amount of compensation would meet the ends of justice in this case. And as per the settled law that the compensation should be commensurate with the facts and circumstances of the case, and it should not be unreasonable and excessive, and it should not be a meager amount. But generally, we will not take into consideration the mitigating circumstances on the part of the plaintiff as well as on the part of the defendant. We never calculate the compensation as per the price index calculation. Even we don't refer under which head we are going to give the compensation. We just pass an order that this is the appropriate amount as per the facts and circumstances of the case, and this is the reasonable compensation I am going to award it. So today we will discuss what are the gray areas and what are the factors and what are the parameters to be taken into consideration while calculating the compensation in such like of the category of the cases. So far as the category of the cases are concerned, the categories are the various categories like defamation cases, malicious prosecution cases, the compensation in the cases of the after the passing of the judgment in a criminal matter. Then fourth category is the cases under the MACT category cases. Now, first of all, we'll take the instances of the defamation cases. Now, what are the main ingredients for filing the suit under this category? So first of all, in the pleadings, it must be stated that the statement given by the other party, that is the defendant, is the statement of fact, but it is not the statement of the opinion that this is the defamatory statement given by the defendant. It may be the oral statement, it may be the written statement. And the next ingredient is that the statement should be the false statement, and it is the duty of the court to make the analysis of that statement with the objective standard that it falls under the category of this parameter, that this is the defamatory statement and it is a false statement. Next, the statement must be referred to the plaintiff, and it must not be a general statement regarding the group of the person, but it must relate to the plaintiff. That suppose I say that B is a thief. Now this is pertaining to the B. If I say I think that B is a thief, then it is my opinion that it is not the statement pertaining to the specific allegation against the B, but this is my own opinion. And if I say that the persons like B are the thieves, then this is the general statement. But so far as the ingredient of this defamation is concerned, the statement must be specific statement pertaining to the person. Then the next ingredient is that the statement must be published and it should not be in the good faith and the intention of the other party, that is the defendant, is of no meaning. Then next, the defenses are to be taken by the other party. So these are the parameters for filing the suit for the defamation. And in defense, naturally the defendant would take the stand that the statement is a true statement, and I have given this statement in a bona fide manner, and this statement is a privileged statement, and at the last he will also seek the apology and he will try to retract from the statement given. These are the basically defenses taken by the defendant. And now, what are the parameters to be seen while considering the actionable wrong in the cases of defamation? First of all, it would damage the reputation of the plaintiff, and and what are the mitigating circumstances taken by the plaintiff, that is he will vindicate his stand also that the statement given by the defendant is false statement, and he will also claim the damages for the hurt and the humiliation and for the mental agony. These are the basically heads under which he will claim the damages in the cases of the defamation cases. And now it is the duty of the court to assess all these factors while calculating the compensation. And in cases of defamation, the compensation is to be calculated for his reputation, for pains and sufferings, and for the mitigating circumstances while taking the mitigating circumstances of both the parties. And the legal points which come during this type of litigation, firstly is the limitation of for filing the suit. The limitation is to for filing the suit is 1 year from the publication of the statement. Then second category of the this legal aspect is that the claim for damages for defamation is personal in nature, and it dies if the plaintiff dies. Then third issue is regarding the jurisdiction of the case. Jurisdiction is controlled by section 19 of the CPC, where the statement originated, that is where it is published, or where its consequence cause occur. There are two types of places where the case can be filed under the category of this defamation. Then the next aspect which has been taken by the Honorable High Court in case of this Captain Maha Singh versus Captain Natha Singh, whether the statement given in a court in a particular case can be considered as the defamatory statement. Then it was held by our Honorable High Court that this type of statement is not a defamatory statement. Then the next category of cases is the malicious prosecution. Now, first of all, the question arises, and I am posing this question to the audience, whether this malicious prosecution is only restricted to criminal proceedings, or the compensation can also be given for filing of the wrong civil cases, that is malicious civil cases also. Then these are the main ingredients for filing the suit for malicious prosecution. That is, first ingredient is that the suit must have been instituted or continued by the defendant. This is the first requirement. Second, that the proceedings complained of terminated in favor of the plaintiff. Third is the proceedings initiated against the plaintiff must be without any reasonable or probable cause. Then the defendant must have acted maliciously. Then the plaintiff must have suffered some damage to his reputation, to his person or his property. In such type of cases, there are basically three factors for taking into consideration while computing the compensation. That is the injury caused to the reputation, that is the injury caused to the mind of the person. Then the injury caused to the person, that is the physical injury if any. Then the injury caused to his property. These are the three types of the factors which are taken into consideration in such type of cases. Then these are the certain legal aspects pertaining to this malicious prosecution. Whether simple filing of the complaint to the police or FIR can lead to this malicious prosecution, the answer would be no. The case cannot be filed on the basis of merely filing of the FIR or for merely lodging of the complaint. No doubt, the suit for damages for defamation can be filed on these grounds, but suit for malicious prosecution cannot be filed because it can only be filed after the conclusion of the proceedings. Then the question which I have already posed to you, that whether the malicious prosecution can be launched in the civil proceeding, the answer would be yes. It can also be launched in the civil proceedings also. In case of this Munni Devi versus Metrolal, no doubt this case was dismissed by the Honorable High Court for the purpose of the damages. But in this case, it has been held that the malicious prosecution can also be launched when the other party, the defendant, files frivolous litigation in civil matters also. We know that there is a provision under the CPC for claiming the special cost, or the civil court can also grant the cost for this vexatious litigation. But this malicious prosecution can also be launched as per the observation made in this judgment. Now the next question is, what is the standard of proof for proving the ingredients of this malicious prosecution? Whether the judgment of acquittal is sufficient for proving the ingredients of this malice, the answer would be no. Because in this case, the evidence is to be scanned on the basis of preponderance of probability, whereas the judgment of acquittal, that is the judgment of criminal court, is only relevant for the purpose that the proceedings were launched against the plaintiff. But the observations, the findings of the judgment in criminal court are not binding upon the civil court. And it is also well settled principles of law as per the provisions of section 41 to section 44 of the Indian Evidence Act, that the judgment of criminal court is not binding upon the civil court, and judgment of the civil court is not binding upon the this criminal court. But there are certain exceptions, like in section 41, that the judgment of the probate is a judgment in rem, and that is the conclusive judgment. And now the next aspect is the area of this limitation. For the purpose of malicious prosecution under Article 74, there is a limitation of 1 year. Similarly, for filing the suit for defamation is also a limitation of 1 year from the date of the publication of the statement. Then next, the general issues arises in these type of litigation is regarding the court fee issues. Since we have discussed the first category of the defamation cases, what are the ingredients, what are the legal aspects attached to these cases. Second is malicious prosecution. The third category would be, I have already explained, that is the litigation under the Fatal Accident Act, that is the compensation or damages claimed on the basis of judgment passed in a criminal court. Now, the court fee issues are also required for the purpose of that litigation also. And there is a dispute regarding this controversy, and earlier there were divergent views regarding this proposition. But now I would say that this controversy has been resolved by the Honorable Supreme Court, because in the year 2008, the Honorable Supreme Court has passed judgment in case of Shiv Kumar Sharma versus Santosh Kumari. That case was pertaining to the damages in a case of agreement to sell. And in that case, the Honorable Apex Court has observed that there is no criteria for the determination of the claim at the stage of the filing of the suit for the purpose of court fee. And there is no objective standard for determining this factor. Therefore, the tentative court fee should be fixed in such type of cases. Thereafter, in the year 2012 and 2015, two judgments were passed by our Honorable High Court. First is the Manjeet Singh case. In Manjeet Singh versus Byan Singh case, it was ordered by the Honorable High Court that the court fee should be fixed as per the value of the suit, that is the amount claimed in the petition. But in that judgment, Shiv Kumar Sharma case was not taken into consideration. In the year 2015, Sunita Rani versus State of Punjab judgment has been passed by our Honorable High Court. In that judgment, the Shiv Kumar Sharma case has not been taken into account, but that judgment has been passed on the basis of this Manjeet Singh case judgment. And in the year 2017, now our Honorable High Court has again passed judgment in Amandeep Sidhu case. In this case, the Sunita Rani case was considered by the Honorable High Court, and it has been categorically observed by our Honorable High Court that the tentative court fee should be fixed because there is no objective standard and there is no criteria to ascertain the amount at the stage of the filing of the suit for the purpose of this fixing court fee. Then in the year 2019, again in Naveen Gulati case, this same opinion has been taken by our Honorable High Court. Now, to my mind, now this controversy has been resolved by our Honorable High Court that the court fee should be fixed as a tentative court fee in such category of the cases. Now the question arises, okay, what type of order should be passed in this court? I would also like to add one thing more, that while passing these judgments by our Honorable High Court, one rider has been imposed by the court that the plaintiff would give an undertaking to the court that at the time of passing of the final judgment, he will fix the court fee, and that the recording of this statement is very much essential by the court. Now the next question is, what order should be passed by the court while giving the permission to the plaintiff for filing such type of cases? While recording the statement of the plaintiff, then in this type of cases, conditional judgment could be passed by the civil court or by the court of original jurisdiction that such and such statement has been suffered by the plaintiff, and plaintiff would fix the court fee as and when the judgment is passed, and while passing the judgment, a conditional decree has been passed and reasonable time should be given to the party, that is the plaintiff, for fixing the court fee. Suppose in case the plaintiff didn't turn up for filing the court fee, then what would happen? Then that can be recovered under the provisions of Order 33 of the CPC from as a land revenue from the properties of the plaintiff. Then the next wrong is the Fatal Accident Act cases, that is the claim filed on the basis of the death of a person, and in such type of cases that it may be by death by way of electrocution, it may be by way of the explosion of the gas cylinder, maybe by drowning on account of the opening of the water channels, maybe due to the leakage of gas, maybe that is the fires in the crackers factory, maybe busting of ammonia tankers, and maybe in the as I have already said that in the murder cases. So while this first of all this act, Fatal Accident Act, it is applicable only in the death cases, and in the injury cases the damages are filed under this common law. While filing the cases under this Fatal Accident Act, the parameters of filing this case are basically same as like the malicious prosecution, but for the purpose of this compensation, the court will take into account the multiplier formula given in the MACT cases. Now it is a well settled principle of law that for calculating the compensation in fatal accident cases, the formula multiplier would be taken. That's why I have clubbed this topic for subordinate judges as well as for ADJs for the purpose of discussion, that now the knowledge of the for calculation of the compensation with the multiplier method is also required to the civil judges also. Now under Fatal Accident cases, these are governed by the provisions of this Fatal Accident Act. Now there are two relevant sections for the purpose of this compensation. One is section 1A and other is section 2. Under section 1A, the compensation is claimed by the dependents. It is well settled principles of the Honorable Supreme Court that under section, there is a demarcation of section 1 and section 2. Under section 1, the compensation is to be claimed by the dependents, while under section 2, the compensation is to be claimed by the legal representatives from the estate of the deceased. Now take an example. Suppose the deceased was earning rupees 10,000 per month. He was spending rupees 6,000 upon his family and 4,000 he was depositing in the bank. Now 4,000 rupee has become his estate, while 6,000 is the dependency. Under section 1, the claimants would claim the compensation on the basis of dependency as well as on the basis of LRs from the remaining 4,000 rupees. But the 4,000 is to be shared by all the legal representatives, and rupees 6,000 is to be distributed amongst the dependents. So there is a demarcation to understand this proposition. Suppose the deceased is not having any dependent. Let's assume he is having one brother and sister, those who are not dependents. Then there would be a calculation of the LRs for the purpose of the benefits of the estate. That should not be the calculation for the just like the claiming this compensation on the basis of dependency. There is a difference, no doubt, in Sarla Verma case and Pranay Sethi case. Hello, Chetan ji, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir. You're audible enough.
Okay.
I think just the light has been dimmed because of the.
Yes.
But sir, we can hear you.
That's why I was.
Your screen.
Okay.
Sir.
Now, for the purpose of this calculation of compensation on the basis of dependency and on the basis of LRs, there is a demarcation under this Fatal Accident Act. Now, this concept has been applied also in the cases of motor vehicle cases for the calculation of the compensation by the legal representative of the deceased. No doubt, in the cases of Sarla Verma as well as in the Pranay Sethi case, the limit of benefits of estate is only to the extent of rupees 15,000. But if this concept is applied, then the compensation is to be calculated as per the provisions of section 2 of this Fatal Accident Act. This concept has been adopted by the Delhi High Court in the year 2017 and 2018 in a judgment passed by the Honorable Delhi High Court. Now this is the demarcation between section 1 and section 1A and the section 2A of the Fatal Accident Act. Now again, coming back to the damages. Now we are for these types of categories, we are concerned about the damages and compensation given this actionable wrongs. And the fourth category I have left, I will discuss about, that is pertaining to the MSCT cases. Now for awarding the damages, first of all, we have to understand the types of the damages. What are the types of the damages? That because now it is the well settled principle of law that the damages is to be given as per the head. Now these are the types of the damages, whether these are the general and special damages. General damages which flow from the law, which are implied from the law, that is, these are the pains and sufferings, the harassment, these are the damages would come under the category of the general damages. And special damages, these would not necessarily implied by the law, but it should be specifically pleaded and proved by these are also known as pecuniary damages, but the general damages are known as the non-pecuniary damages. Then the next category is the nominal damages. Suppose an injury has been caused to the party, but no, sorry, no injury has been caused to the party, but there is an infringement of his legal right. Then the nominal damages are to be given by the court. Third category is the aggravated damages. The aggravated damages are also known as, these are exemplary damages. These are the also known as the penal damages. These are awarded for the purpose of this aggravated damages. Since we are dealing with this malicious prosecution, defamation, then for the purpose of death, these are the aggravated and the penal damages which are to be given by the court for the purpose of this humiliation, distress, embarrassment, and this false imprisonment. Then these assault cases, I have not taken into consideration the compensation for this nuisance and the medical negligence, because medical negligence itself is a very big topic, and it would be taken into consideration in the next topics. Then the next category is the compensatory damages. These damages should be commensurate with the actual loss or damage suffered by the plaintiff. And another classification of the damages is the liquidated and unliquidated damages. These are used as per the provisions of Section 73 and Section 74 of this Indian Contract Act. Basically, these terms are used when we calculate the damages on the basis of contract. There is one more category of the damage, that is the continuing damages. Those are given if any injury is caused which is continuous in nature, which is perpetuating. In such like eventuality, that types of damages are to be dealt with by the court. And the main purpose of discussing the types of damages is that because it is now the requirement of the law that the court should pass the order or the decree granting the damages under the specific heads. So we should be having the knowledge regarding the types of the damages for awarding the damages under various categories. So we can understand that the damage, suppose we are dealing with the case for malicious prosecution. We can give the damages under the general damages head. We can give the damages under the special head, because suppose I have a special head as well as the compensatory damages, because this is the expenditure spent by me on the litigation, that is the specific amount. So that is the compensatory damages, and the damages for pain and suffering would come under the category of this general damages. Suppose if he has failed to prove his case but the injury has been caused, then he would be given the nominal damages. So the category should be mentioned by the learned courts while assessing the damages and while passing the orders. So this was all about this three types of litigation. Now the next factor is regarding these legal aspects pertaining to these fatal accident cases. Court fee issue I have already discussed. Jurisdiction, it is also covered by this section 19 of the CPC. Then the next issue is regarding the parties who can file the suit for compensation under the Fatal Accident Act. As per the provisions of this act, I have already stated, as per section 1, there is a limited category of persons who can file, that is like wife, husband, children, or parents. These are the four categories which can file the suit under the section 1A of the Fatal Accident Act. While under section 2, all the legal heirs can file the suit for compensation. Suppose both sets file the suit, that is suit filed by the dependents under section 1 who comes under section 1A, and other set under section 2 of this Fatal Accident Act, that is the legal representatives. Then the amount from the estate would be distributed as per the provisions of the Indian Succession Act. Whereas under section 1A, the amount should be apportioned as per the discretion of the court, depending upon the facts and circumstances of the case. Now the second aspect is, next aspect is regarding this limitation for filing the suit. Under section 82, The limitation for filing the suit under Fatal Accident Act is 2 years. It has been now well settled by the Honorable Supreme Court is Damni versus Managing Director. But there is a demarcation. Suppose instead of filing suit under this fatal accident, the plaintiff files suit under general law for the compensation on account of the death of suppose his husband or his brother, then there would be a limitation of sorry, limitation of 3 years from the date of death. And this compensation has no concern with the passing of the judgment, but the limitation would start from the date of death. These all aspects were pertaining to three types of these cases for this claiming compensation and damages, that is regarding defamation, this malicious prosecution, and then the compensation under the Fatal Accident Act. Now the next category is the MACT cases. Now MACT cases I have already discussed. These are relevant because now we'll discuss about the formula, how the formula is to be applied in death cases as well as in injury cases. First of all, what are the parameters of this MACT Act? Now the MACT Act, this revolves around these basically terms. These are the terminologies used while calculating the compensation. Now, I would also like to share one thing, that in today's lecture, I'll only discuss about this formula and how to calculate the compensation. So far as the defenses of these insurance companies and other defenses taken by the other parties and the other aspects of pertaining to MACT case would be covered in the next lecture, in the next week, or maybe in the afterward lectures. These are the basically things which are to be seen while calculating the compensation. Number one, vehicle involved. What is the nature of the vehicle? Whether the person was a single or more persons were sitting in the vehicle. Then next is driver, who is owner, who is victim. Now victim, whether the victim is a injured or he is a deceased. And the second category is regarding whether he is a child, whether he is a woman, whether he is employed, whether he is self-employed, whether he is professional, whether he is student, whether he is school-going student. And then the next category is who are the legal representatives. Then the next is the role of the police, then insurance companies, then registration authorities, then doctors. These all are required for the purpose of for the calculation of the compensation. Then the documents which are required, these are the basically for the purpose of this driver. These are the driving license. Then owner, these are the registration certificates, permits. Then vehicle, whether it is insured or it is not insured. Then for this victim, this MLR and PMR, these are relevant documents. These are basically also required for the purpose of calculation of the compensation while calculating the compensation in Fatal Accident Act. Then next is the requirement of a FIR and DDR. Then this challan case, whether it is a challan case, then whether this MACT petition, when this is the detailed accident report, because now under the new procedure, the detailed accident report is to be filed by the police, then the proceedings are initiated. Earlier, there was a trend of filing of the MACT petitions, or it is a application filed under 158 of clause 6 of this Motor Vehicle Act. Then next is the medical expenditure records and other records. Then the negligence is to be seen, whether it is a simple negligence, whether it is contributed negligence, whether it is a composite negligence. Because the amount is to be determined and distributed as per these terminologies. Now the main basic judgment is the judgment of Sarla Verma judgment, uh, which is this reported case of 2009, and the method has been given, that is the multiplier method has been given for the purpose of calculation of the compensation in death cases, which has been now followed, and it has been endorsed in the judgment of this 2017 Parnay City case. Now, what are the factors to be seen while determining the compensation in death cases? Number one, the age of the deceased. Second is the this income of the deceased. For the purpose of this age of the deceased, the age of the deceased is to be determined from the document, that is the age certificate, maybe the matriculation certificate, maybe the school living certificate, maybe this on the basis of this Aadhaar, or maybe election card. The age can be determined from these documents. Suppose if there is no such type of documents, then the age is to be determined from the analysis of the evidence on the record. Then next is the income of the deceased. Now, if person is employed, then his income is evident from his salary certificate or from the record of his employer. Suppose if he is not employed anywhere, then his notional income is to be assessed, and the notional income is to be assessed. The general criteria adopted by the court is to take into account the minimum wages as per the minimum wages. Now, in the year 2019, one judgment has been passed by our Honorable High Court that if there is these DC rates, and suppose if there are DC rates as well as the notification of this minimum wages act, and there is a variation between these two types of these documents, then which criteria is to be adopted by the court? The Honorable High Court has pleased to pass this order that the minimum wages act notification is to be passed under the provision of the act, whereas the DC rates are without any legal basis. So in such like category, the minimum wages are to be taken into consideration. I would also like to add one thing more, that these types of documents are merely guiding factors. These are merely guidelines, because the word has been used under the act is the just compensation. So the elaboration of this just compensation, it can be elaborated by taking into consideration, that is the parameters given. Suppose if there is no parameter, then there are also number of judgments that the compensation can be calculated, worked on the basis of guesswork also. Now the next aspect is the future prospects. Earlier there was a controversy regarding this aspect, what future prospect should be given. Now this controversy has been resolved in Parnay City's case. It has been fixed as per the age of the deceased, then number of dependents, then the amount should be deducted. Then there are other deductions. Suppose like in Haryana, there is a policy in the cases of government employees. Now the judgment of Brinder Kumar in 2020 judgment has come that all the benefits should be deducted from the compensation by this, except this pension. Then under this conventional heads, these benefits are fixed. That is 15,000 for this consortium. The consortium is 40,000, 15,000 for this from the state benefits. Then 15,000 is funeral charges. Now there is also a controversy regarding this benefit regarding under the conventional head. That is the amount of consortium given by the court. Oh, this the year 2018, the Honorable Supreme Court has clarified three types of consortiums. Consortium is basically, that is the benefit for the companionship or for love and affection. So sometimes the court awards the compensation under the head of this love and affection and under the head of this consortium also. In Magma General Insurance Company, the Honorable Supreme Court has classified the consortium in three categories. Now, this spousal consortium is given to the death of the spouse. This parental consortium is granted to the child on account of the death of parent. This filial consortium is to be given to the parent on account of the death of child. Now this Magma General Insurance judgment, this judgment passed by two judges. Now the three-judge bench has recently passed the judgment on 30th of June 2020. This judgment is yet to be reported. This is United India Insurance Company versus Sindar Kaur. In this judgment, this Magma General Insurance Company has been followed, and it has been categorically held that the benefits, that is the compensation under consortium head, should be given to each of the dependents. Suppose after the death of a spouse, there is a wife and the two children. Earlier, as per the Prannoy Chitti, only 40,000 is to be given for the three dependents. But now, as per this Magma and this latest judgment, 40,000 each is to be given, but under the different heads. That is for spousal this consortium and for filial consortium. Coming back. This. So convention heads we have discussed. Now the next issue is regarding the apportionment. Apportionment I have already discussed. If it is to the dependents or to the LRs from the estate, that is to be seen as per the facts and the circumstances. Then the next is the interest part. Now the interest is the mandatory as per the provisions of the Act. Now this is the formula as per the age of the deceased. This is 15 to 20, then 20 to 50, 25, then 26 to 30. Now the question arises, suppose a person who is a deceased is having his age 30 years and 5 months, and in another case he is having age of 35 years 7 months. Now what should be the multiplier? Because from 31 to 35 the multiplier is 16. If he crosses 35 5 months or 35 7 months, then what should be the multiplier? In one of the cases, the MACT has applied the multiplier. Suppose if he is having 35 and few months, then he applied the multiplier of 15 instead of 16. But the Honorable Supreme Court has observed that the multiplier of 16 would be applicable till he attains the age of 36. He may be 35, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. Till he attains the age of 30, the multiplier of 16 would be applicable. Now this controversy has been resolved. So the next controversy in this table is the last multiplier, that is 65 to 70 years. In this judgment, in para 42, the Honorable Supreme Court has given the multipliers as per the age, and the Honorable Supreme Court has stopped the multiplier beyond the age of 70. They have categorically written that 65 to 70 the multiplier would be 5, and there is no line after this observation. But in para 42, the Honorable Supreme Court has taken into consideration all the tables. That is in Sushama's case, in Triloknath's case, the Triloknath case further clarified in Charlie's case, then the table given in Schedule 2 of the Motor Vehicle Act, though that has been amended in the year 2018. While comparing those tables, the last line indicates 65 years and above has been written. But in this para 42, the Honorable Supreme Court has written 65 to 70 years, the multiplier would be 5. Meaning thereby now there is a controversy. If a person is having age about, suppose, say, more than 70 years, so what should be the multiplier on his death? Or no compensation should be given to such like person. Suppose if an advocate or if a doctor who is a practicing and he is earning huge income in, and on his accident death, whether he is not entitled for any benefit of dependency, how the amount should be calculated in such like situation. And this is again for the audience to give answer ke how the amount would be ascertained in such like situations. So this is the table given for the purpose of the calculation of the compensation. This is the notification of the year 2018. That notification has been issued under section 163 of the Motor Vehicle Act, because under Motor Vehicle Accident Act there are basically three types of liabilities. One is no fault liability, that is under 140 section 140 of the Act. Though in the year 2019 the Act has been amended, but it is yet to be notified. Certain provisions are notified as per section 1 of that Act in the month of this September 2019. As per this notification, under section 163 of this Motor Vehicle Act, now the schedule has been eliminated from the book. And under section 163A, there is a strict liability. 140 is pertaining to this no fault liability. The amount is certain under the section itself. Under section 163A, this is the strict liability. For the purpose of this death, fatal accident, rupees 5 lakh has been fixed. For the purpose of this permanent disablement, the calculation would be by rupees 5 lakhs multiplied by the percentage of the disability as per the provisions of this Employees Compensation Act, that is old, this is Workman Compensation Act. And for minor injury, it is to be rupees 25,000. And from 1st January of 2019, the amount of compensation would be increased 5% annually. So this is for the purpose of this strict liability. And on the basis of fault liability, there is a provision of section 166 and the procedure has been given under section 168 of the Motor Vehicle Act for the purpose of calculation of the compensation. That is the just compensation is to be calculated, but the formula has been given this in Sarla Verma and then Prana Chetty, then Magma judgment. Now it is followed by Satvinder Kaur judgment in the year 2020. So this is the overview of the calculation of the compensation and other benefits. This was the case where the age of the person was taken, that is 50 year 3 months was the age, and the multiplier was applied as per the this formula which comes after this 51 to 65. Next is the dependency. Income we have determined, age we have seen. Now how the dependency is to be determined? Dependency is to be determined as per the family members of the deceased. If it is 2 to 3, then 1/3 is to be deducted. If 4 to 6, 1/4. Then if it exceeds 6, then it is to be 1/5 to be deducted. Now if he is a bachelor, then his dependency, that is personal expenses would be 50% and 50% he would contribute towards his family. But if this bachelor is having large family, then there would be a deduction of this 1/3. So there is no definition of this large family. It is to be seen from this facts and circumstances of the case. Then future prospects. Future prospects are also this demarcated on the basis of this, whether he is on permanent job or he is self-employed. This permanent job, the Honorable Supreme Court has clarified that for the purpose of this permanent job, there must be a provision of the addition of increment after every year. So it is also given as per the age, that is 40 up to 40, then 50%, then 40 to 50, 30%, then 50 to 60, it is 50%. After 60 years, no future prospect would be given to the dependents or to the LRs. Then in case of self-employed or fixed salary, from up to 50, then 40%, then 40 to 50, then 25%, then age of 50 to 60, it is 10%. Then conventional head, I have already discussed that if 15,000 for loss of estate, this loss of consortium, then funeral expenses. But this consortium I have already explained, then loss of estate I have already explained. If it is filed by the LRs from the estate of the deceased, then the method would be the multiplier method and the amount would be distributed as per the provisions of the Indian Succession Act. Now this is the calculation, this is the example how to calculate the amount. Suppose the income has been assessed, that is rupees 6,000. This I have already stated that the income is to be assessed, it would depend upon person to person. Salaried person, no problem. If he is not a salaried, then as per the basis of notional income. Suppose if he is a student, college student, then the income, notional income to be assessed as per the studies, as per the course taken by him. That would depend on the facts and circumstances of that would also depend on the status of the family, the academic credential of the deceased. It would all depend upon it. In case of women, suppose if it is a working woman, then the income would be calculated as per the salary received by her. Suppose if she is a house lady, then how the income is to be assessed? As per the Lata Vadva judgment and the Arun Kumar's case, both these judgments are dealing to the ascertainment of the amount in cases of the death of a child and death of woman. In cases of women, if her husband is working, then 1/3 of his salary is to be taken as the income of the housewife. But if there is no evidence that his husband is working, then her notional income is to be calculated in the case of women. But in certain judgments, it is to be calculated on the basis of, again, Minimum Wages Act, because she has been brought under the category of skilled workers. Then in case of women, there would not be any cut on her personal expenses as in other cases. In case of this child up to age of 15, there is a multiplier of this 15. If it is to be seen up to the age of 15, in case by taking the aid of judgments, the multiplier of 15 has been taken and the notional income has been fixed as rupees 3,000. That is, it would come 450. But we can take the aid from the notification of 2018. In case of death, now the income, even on the basis of no fault, rupees 5 lakh has been fixed as the in cases of death. So that can also be a guiding factor for ascertaining the age, ascertaining the compensation in cases of the like death cases. Now, the next is the future. So income can be assessed as per the category of the person. Then future prospects. Future prospects, suppose earning 6,000, then 40%, he comes under the category of this 40% of the income would be added as the future prospect. Then the deduction towards the personal expenditure, suppose he is having this 1/3 that is on the basis of his dependents. It is to be deducted as 2,800. These are the personal expenses. Then the total income comes out to be 5,600 after the deductions. And by adding this 2,400, The multiplier is taken as this as per the age, that is 24 years 18. Then 5600 it multiplied by 12 multiplied by 18. Now there is one more question this may arise, that when the this income tax is to be deducted from this amount. Certain courts are deducting this income tax on the basis of monthly salary. Certain persons are deducting the income tax on the basis of annual income. In my opinion, it should be deducted on the basis of annual income. First of all, calculate the annual income of the deceased. Then, if it comes under the this category of this income tax slab, then deduct the income tax from that, because the proportionately future prospects would be added in that amount after the deduction of this income tax. So then by this calculation, this 5600 then multiplied by 12 by 18, 18 is the multiplier, 56 is the income remained. Then it comes out to 12 lakh 9,600. Then funeral expenses would be 15,000, loss of estate would be 15,000. This loss of this filial consortium, this is 80,000, because there are two respondents. Then the total compensation awarded would be such like this, and the interest is to be given. Now the as per the judgments earlier, there was a provision for awarding 9% interest, but now the certain judgments are saying that it should be 7% or 8%. This is the discretion of the court. So this is the method how to calculate the compensation in death cases. Now in these are the deductions. The pension, suppose if he is a government employee, in case in the category of these Haryana state employees, because there is a scheme of giving full salary up to the age of retirement if he dies during his service, then that financial assistance, that is the total amount, is to be deducted as per the latest judgment. Earlier there were the judgments that the 50% amount is to be deducted, but now the whole of the amount is to be deducted from the compensation. But the pension is not to be deducted from the amount. Now coming to the injury case. This is the judgment. This is Rajkumar versus Ajay Kumar. This judgment we can say is the Sarla Verma of the injuries cases. In this judgment, the injuries are defined by the Honorable Supreme Court, and the criteria has been given how the compensation is to be calculated, because this is also relevant for the civil judges also. While calculating the compensation for injury cases, no doubt this Fatal Accident Act would only cover the death cases, but the compensation for injury cases can be filed under the general law, which is having the limitation of 3 years. So the amount can be calculated as per the observations of this Rajkumar versus Ajay Kumar judgment. The damages are given under two heads, that is pecuniary damages, that is the special damages, and the non-pecuniary damages. First category has been given regarding the actual expenses incurred by the party, that is treatment, hospitalization, medicine, transportation, etc., etc. Second category is the loss of earning during the period of treatment. Then next is loss of future earning on account of the permanent disability. Then next is future medical expenses. Suppose if it is a case of temporary injury, we can say the simple injury, then the damages under clause 1, clause this A, this loss of earning during the period of treatment would be given, but these next two types of damages would not be given. This non-pecuniary, this damages for pain and suffering would be added for the simple injury. Then the other damage, the Honorable Supreme Court has further observed that this is not the state jacket formula. In serious cases, the other benefits can be given, but the reasons must be recorded under what circumstances these benefits are given under the other heads. The other head, loss of amenities, loss of expectation of life. This is also the loss of prospects of marriage. Uh, these are the benefits, pecuniary and the non-pecuniary benefits. For the purpose of permanent disablement, now I am talking, first I have discussed about the temporary injuries, where the disablement ceases after the treatment. Then the damages would be given only under three heads I have already discussed. But in case of permanent disablement, the damages would be given under all these heads. And there is also a partial permanent cases. Partial, now what is the partial permanent case and the permanent disablement case? In partial permanent case, suppose if his permanent disability of his hand is 50%, but the permanent disablement of his total body is 40%. For the purpose of permanent disablement of his hand, he would not be given any extra benefit if it is not affecting his avocation or his duties. This is the demarcation made by the Honorable Supreme Court in this judgment. If the permanent disablement is affecting his job and avocation, then and then only he is liable uh, uh, for the benefit of this permanent disablement. Otherwise, it would be come under the category. Suppose this my hand has been uh, impaired, and this is the disablement to the extent of this like 40%, or I can say it is 80%, but it is not affecting my job or avocation. Then the damages cannot be calculated as per the multiplier as per this 80% of this disablement, because it is not affecting my job or avocation. Like it is affecting my job or avocation to the extent of 10%, then the damages would be calculated as per this 10% of the criteria. So this is the demarcation distinction between this temporary injury, partial permanent disablement, then permanent disablement. Now, what is the criteria to calculate these expenses? These are the expenses which are to be given apart from other expenses. Now the other expenses are those are only calculated in the cases of this permanent disablement. For the calculation, suppose a person of 30 years, he has been injured. Ketanji, this.
Sir, no, sir, don't disconnect, sir. Don't disconnect. I think just go back to your PPT, sir, again. It'll be all right.
Yeah.
Just go back to your PPT, sir. Just open your PPT. That's all is required. So don't do that. Don't do that. Just open your PPT, okay, sir. That'll be at the bottom. So click on this. Just minimize this window. Minimize this window on the top.
Yes.
And there we have it, sir. And just minimize this window from the. No, so just minimize it, sir. Minimize it. Yes. So good to go, sir.
Okay, now it's visible.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Suppose a person of 30 years, he is an injured person, and his income has been calculated as rupees 3,000 per month. His hand is amputated, and his permanent disability is assessed as assessed as 60% by the doctor, and he was terminated from his job because he could not be no longer a driver. The tribunal assessed the loss of his future earning capacity under the head of this future earning capacity as 75%. his total permanent disability is 60%, but the tribunal earned it as a 75%. I would also like to add here that if the doctor has assessed his assumingly disability 10%, but his job has been badly affected, he has been terminated from the service on account, and he is unable to do that job, then even it can be taken as 100% by the tribunal. No doubt the mitigating circumstances would be taken into account by the court, whether what he could do with this disablement and what he was doing before this disablement, and now what he is doing after this disablement. These all factors are to be considered by the court while assessing this disability. So this is the criteria, and now in this case the compensation would be calculated as this 75%. This is the annual income would come out to be by 12 multiplied by 3000. This is 36,000, and 75% would come out to be 2700 this thousand. Then multiplier of 17 would be applicable as per the age, that is he is aged about 30 years. The formula would be same, Sarla Verma formula. Then the loss of future earning would come out to be this 4,59,000 rupees. But in this case, there would be no deduction on the personal expenses and the other expenses as like in the this death cases. Now, in this case, 75% of the amount has been taken from the annual income, but future prospects are not added. Now it is settled law that even in the injury cases, the future prospects are also to be added. Now there is one method. You calculate the amount considering it the 100%. Then take the 75% as the amount, and the remainder should be left, and the 75% should be taken for the easiest calculation of the amount as per the Sarla Verma formula. So this was the all about this, the calculation of the compensation in MACT cases. Now I am summing up the this today's topic because I am restricting. No doubt I have taken, I think, extra time, but I am restricting my topic again. I am repeating to the calculation of the compensation. Other aspect I have left, even in the next lecture we will discuss about the detailed aspects of this LRs in MACT cases, the defenses to be taken by the other parties, pay and recover principles, driving license issues, permit issues, then insurance issues, then the negligence type, contributory negligence, composite negligence. What are the effect of these? Those are to be discussed in the next lecture. In today's lecture, I have only discussed how to calculate the compensation in such like cases in wrongful actions, basically wrongful act, neglect, or by way of this default or negligence. These are the terminologies used in the Fatal Accident Act as well as in the motor vehicle accident. So we have discussed about this actionable wrongs in defamation cases. What are the ingredients? What are the legal aspects are to be seen? Then malicious prosecution. Then in cases of compensation in death cases by the LRs as a compensation, like in murder cases or like in other, no doubt in cases of this, when there is a state liability or it is the duty of the public authorities, then the people file the state writ petition before the Honorable High Court for the purpose of compensation. That is well settled law. But if there is a disputed question of law and fact, then even the Honorable High Court relegate the parties to the civil court, and it is that the jurisdiction of the civil court is also parallel. Suppose if for electrocution a civil suit is filed, then no doubt the civil court would determine the amount. I would add here that in cases of death, the amount would be calculated as per the method of Sarla Verma case. That should not be the criteria that this is the appropriate compensation is to be given to the parties in death cases or in injury cases under the general law. Now we have the formula for the calculation of the compensation. But in cases of malicious prosecution and defamation, those come under the that is the hurt to the reputation of the person, pain and sufferings benefits. Those are to be calculated on the basis of those parameters. And it is my humble request now, kindly calculate the compensation and the damages under the various heads and kindly give specific head to the damages and give the kindly reasons under what circumstances how these damages are calculated as per the facts and circumstances of the case. So this was all about my lecture regarding this compensation, this calculation of the compensation. Now I would like to take the question and answer session, because from question and answer session we even we learn more, since we are adult learners and the learning is the continuous process, and we learn by sharing our experiences, by sharing our problems. And I am again repeating that I am sitting here as a law student. I am also learning various things from you people, and now I would like to take the question answer session, Chetanji.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. Sir, can you hear me? Am I audible to you?
Yes, Chetanji.
Sir, great. I will start with the session, sir, without wasting any more time. The first question is in POCSO's cases, who has to determine the final amount of compensation? Is it the trial, the special court, or the district legal service authority, on the recommendation of trial court to determine the amount?
See, in the cases of this POCSO cases, though I have not gone through the provisions of this POCSO Act,
Sir.
but so far the these principles of this CRPC would be applicable for the purpose of this compensation. That is under the head of this 357A. There is a basically scheme for the purpose of calculation of the compensation, and that is to be referred to the district legal service authority. As per my knowledge, the compensation under this criminal liability.
So I think the subsequent, I think it's a related question to the same question that I asked you, sir. It says, and if the specific amount is claimed by the plaintiff as damages, still the court fee would be tentative?
Yes. And I have already, I think I have shared the PPTs also. Chetanji, PPT is visible?
Sir, now it is visible.
It is visible.
So now it is visible, sir.
Visible. Now this is the controversy I have already explained in details, basically. These two judgments, this Manjeet Singh and Sunita Rani, says that the court fee should be fixed as per the amount written in the plaint. But while discussing both the judgments, this Amandeep Sidhu case and Naveen Gulati case, they have now clarified that the tentative court fee is to be fixed in such like this disputes on the basis of actionable wrongs, that is in malicious prosecution, or in cases of this defamation, or the compensation claimed on the basis of death cases, while filing the civil suit under this fatal accident. Under MACT, there is no dispute regarding these controversies. Yes,
so,
next.
Now I think on the same lines, I think the question has another part to it. It says the court fee, whether the cancellation proceeding falls within the purview of trial, that's what we were discussing. Court fees is required to be affixed even if the suit is liable to be dismissed, even then.
First of all, how will you make an opinion that the suit is liable to be dismissed at the first stage?
At the first stage, yes, sir.
At the first stage. Until and unless an application has been filed under Order 7, Rule 11 CPC, that is for the rejection of the plaint, then that is to be decided on the merits as per the facts and circumstances of the case. But at the threshold, you can't make an opinion that the suit is liable to be dismissed. You can take the undertaking of the parties, and at the time of filing of when the suit is to be decided, then you can invoke the provisions of Order 33 of the CPC. Yes, sir. Next question.
So I think there's another question related to that, so I'm gonna put it off. Now the question is that if the plaintiff filed for a suit for damages of a specific amount like 5 lakh rupees, then whether the plaintiff has to fix court fee on the value of the suit, or there is some fixed amount.
Actually, this is again the repetition of the questions. I have clarified why this, sir. Chetanji, this slide is, I think, visible.
Yes, it is visible, sir. So I think all these questions have already been answered. I think so. I'll just
Yes.
move
Now,
forward.
as per the latest law, which has taken into consideration the other divergent opinions, that it is to be fixed on the tentative this amount of the relief. Because the observations of the Honorable Supreme Court in Shiv Kumar Sharma's case were not taken into account in these two judgments, this Manjeet Singh and Sunita Rani. These are shown in red color. And then Amandeep Singh Sidhu case has taken into account these judgments. And by relying upon this Shiv Kumar Sharma's case, it has been now resolved that the tentative amount is to be fixed.
Sir.
Yes.
Answer whether a medical record is per se admissible or is it required to be proved by the examining the medical officer.
Now the medical record, basically what happens in the cases of this permanent like disablement, the doctor is required to be examined.
So.
Because it is the duty of the court to ascertain whether it is going to affect the job and avocation of the deceased person, injured person or not. And it is to be only ascertained after the examination of the doctor. And in Rajkumar's case, it has been categorically held by the Honorable Supreme Court that it is the duty of the judges to record the evidence in their presence, and they should actively participate in the while recording in the evidence. They should not be sit as a mute spectators. So it all depends upon the facts and circumstances of the case. Suppose it is a case of simple injuries. So there, I think there is no need if that record is not much disputed by the other party. They have brought these medical bills. If those are to be controverted, those are to be controverted by the other party. So it all depends upon the facts and circumstances whether the doctor is to be called or not. But like in the death cases, this PMR, there is no need for calling the doctor. It is only required as per my view that in the cases of permanent disablement.
So.
Yes.
So another question on the court fees. Is the court fees applicable on suits under Fatal Accident Act?
Actually, I am discussing about the court fee issue regarding this Fatal Accident Act cases. There are two types of remedies. First of all,
sorry.
One is under suppose death cases. In death cases,
so
in death cases, either he will come under this Fatal Accident Act cases for the recovery of damages or compensation, like his or her husband has been murdered and he is claiming the damages. So he will file the civil suit under this Fatal Accident Act cases. And for that purpose, the court fee is to be seen by the trial court. And under the MACT cases, in death cases, but that in MACT cases, that is the death is due to the use of motor vehicle. There is a clear this provision of the section that the death is caused on account of the use of motor vehicle. If suppose if a person is sitting on the vehicle and he touches the high power wires and he died in a consequence of that. So whether his case would fall under this Fatal Accident Act or under the Motor Vehicle Act? Now this is the question,
Okay.
and I am posing this question to this audience. Decide the matter where the suit would lie, whether he can file the claim petition before the Motor Vehicle Act, because that was the use of motor vehicle, or it come under this fatal accident cases. So under fatal, if it would come under this fatal accident act, then the court fees to be fixed. But the tentative court fee is to be fixed if he files an application for the exemption from the court. So the court fee issue is only pertaining to the fatal, number one, Fatal Accident Act 1855. Second is if the suit is filed under the general or under the common law for in cases of injury, or in cases of this malicious prosecution, or in cases of defamation, if we file the suit, then the court fee can be exempted.
So I have a question. In the slide, you have mentioned only tentative court fees required to be paid in the relief of damages. So is there a tentative amount that can be say that this is a tentative amount for court fees?
So generally, that is not the tentative amount. They generally fix like 500, 400, 600. Earlier, there was also a judgment of the Honorable High Court that people tend to file the cases like I am entitled for crore of rupees for defamation. I am entitled for this 6 crore rupees for defamation. That a reasonable court fee should be charged in such like eventuality. No doubt, the full court fee is not to be charged. But now the question arises: what is the criteria for assessing the reasonable amount? There is no criteria. But in the latest judgment, now the court says that the tentative amount is to be fixed. Undertaking is to be taken at the time of the dismissal of the suit. You can pass the order under Order 33 that while dismissing the suit, that the court fee is to be charged on this amount, and that is to be recovered as land arrears from the properties of this plaintiff. So it can be written at the time of the dismissal of the suit.
So
Yes, yes.
So there is a term known as a split multiplier. The question is how can it be applied?
Split multiplier in what context he has asked?
So that has not been mentioned. It's just been asked that the split multiplier, how can be
So
applied?
let this question be deferred. I think he
can request the member to let us know in what respect is this question being asked. So
what I understand from this split multiplier, we can say like in this. I had already given the example under Section 1 and Section 2A of the Fatal Accident Act. Or in the cases of this split multiplier, we can say in the cases of LRs, legal representative, or the dependents. If it has been asked in this context, then in cases of this LRs, the amount is to be distributed as per the Succession Act. And if it is on the basis of this dependency, then the amount should be apportioned as per the discretion of the court. That is, suppose if a wife and there are 2 children, and the court has determined, suppose 1 lakh rupees. Suppose court is giving 60,000 to the wife, and this 20,000 to the children each. Then this is the criteria court can adopt. But in the cases of succession, it is to be distributed equally. That is, we can say that is a split multiplier.
Maybe so. Rest, I think if the member has got the answer, then please let us know. If some more clarity on a specific topic is required wherein the split multiplier is applied, please ask the question, and I think sir would be able to answer and take care of that in that respect. So moving to the next one.
Yes.
Now talking about defamation cases, the question is if the person defamed does not enjoy a good reputation in the society, then is it then how can we, what should be the procedure? How should we proceed as a court?
Now that may be one of the mitigating circumstance. It is to be established by the defendant number one. But the reputation of that person is to be seen from the perspective of his friend circle, his relatives, and the general public at large. This is a settled law. And this is a very good question that he is not earning good, commanding good reputation in the society. Then this may be the one of the mitigating circumstances. How the other party would first of all prove this, and there must be a specific pleading and specific proof. But
Yes.
regarding his defamation, the liability of that person is to be seen. But that I am again repeating that can be taken as the mitigating circumstance only. Suppose if he has uttered some defamatory words, maybe by way of libel or by way of slander, then that can be taken into account separately from that issue. Yes, sir.
So the now question is about compensation, and after this we have a lot of questions which are scenario based. So I will take them one by one. Before that, the question is, if a person kills a dog, and dog died in a car accident, can you claim compensation?
Person killed dog and dog died in a car accident.
Yeah. So if a person kills the dog by any means, by hitting him or whatever, or the dog died in a car accident, then in both the scenarios, can you ask for a compensation?
If it is by way of use of this motor vehicle, then under the Motor Vehicle Act, it would come under the category of the property of the third party. Then the compensation can be claimed.
Okay. And if the person
under general law, that he can file the damages. Simple killing under the general law. If by way of this motor vehicle, by way of use of motor vehicle, suppose I am taking another example. Suppose by way of motor vehicle use a mule is killed. Okay. Then for that is the property of third party. So for third party person, that falls under the definition of claiming this compensation under the motor vehicle accident. But if it is by the use of motor vehicle. Yeah.
So now, sir, talking about again our compensation, but now this is about I think which is medical negligence. A doctor conducted a surgical operation on B to remove gallbladder, and during the operation he left a cotton swab inside the abdomen. As a consequence of which B developed some medical problems and had to go
Chetanji, I would like to stop in between. I have already, I think, stated in the start of the lecture that the topic of this medical negligence, because it is a very huge topic, this volume test, this Jacob-Matthew judgment, these all are to be discussed in detail.
Yes, in a different session.
So I'll take the different session for this, and we'll take, definitely we'll take this.
Sir, I think the members do not have any doubt on that, because there's another compliment by Dr. Rajni, sir. He said that one can well imagine the endeavor behind the respective repositories on various topics, thanks to Chandigarh Judicial Academy and all concerned members for consistently illuminating us during this unprecedented times. So I think members have also have this,
thank you so much, Rajni. Thank you so much.
I think members also understand that it's that the efforts that we are all trying to put in.
Because this topic it was very difficult to arrange in 1 hour, taking these 4 aspects also, because even 1 hour can take this the calculation, how to calculate the compensation in death cases and the injury cases. Otherwise, I had to run with the topics basically. I have touched 4 topics in this topic actually. So I have left intentionally this medical medical negligence, basically this nuisance part, we'll discuss. Surely we'll discuss. Yes, next.
Sir. Sir, if the suit for compensation is finally dismissed, how the court fee is to be managed? Is it proper court fee is to be paid by plaintiff, or the tentative court fee to be taken care by the? Okay, just a sec. I think the question is a bit absurd. It's not really complete.
No, the question is not absurd.
No, sir,
I think I have rightly understood this.
Sir.
Actually, at the time of dismissal of the suit, suppose he has a fixed tentative court fee. And now the question arises whether under Order 33 court fee can be recovered. Then the court can form its opinion that this should be the court fee recovered from the this party, because at the time of filing of the suit he had only fixed the tentative court fee. So at the relevant time, it is the discretion of the court, it is the skill of the court how to determine the court fee in that matter, and to direct the party to fix the court fee. Otherwise, that is to be recovered under Order 33, and the judgment is to be sent to the collector for the recovery of court fee.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, moving to the POCSO Act, under Section 33, Subpart 8 of the POCSO Act, is it relevant to award compensation to victim, which provides that such compensation can be quantified and awarded by the learned trial court, since it is a special law? So it will be prevail over general law?
Actually, that amount should be adjusted from the amount already taken.
Okay, sir.
That can be adjusted.
So moving to the second last question of the session, in a marriage function, girl of 10 years get burn injuries and lost eyesight due to accidental commission of gas from cylinder kept for filling balloons. There was a fire at a catering stall nearby, where the marriage place owner or caterer or the balloon seller will be liable to pay compensation.
Yes, they all would be jointly and severally liable if it is the negligence of this balloon seller,
So,
or if it is due to the default in the gas cylinder itself, then the oil company would also be pleaded as a party, as per the latest judgment of this Allahabad High Court.
okay.
So all would be jointly and severally liable.
Makes sense, sir. Now, sir, moving to the last question. It's again a scenario. So it says it's about the school scenario. A teacher is suffering from a back problem, and the moment and she's moving around the class, she's obviously had back problems, so she can't move around so easily. Now, when she was moving back to her desk and she was trying to sit, a student saw a scorpion near the chair. So just to save the teacher, he rushed and he pulled a chair, because of which the teacher landed directly on the ground, because of which she ended up having a slip disc. Now, in this act, would this be an actionable wrong? If yes, how the compensation should be assessed?
This is not the actionable wrong. It would not fall under the category of this actionable wrong. The facts are evident itself.
It said will not fall under the category of
actionable claim.
Actionable
this wrong.
Okay, sir.
Because he has acted in good faith and he has removed the desk, and due to that impact, she fell down on the ground, and she suffered the injuries.
So, okay. Sir, I would like to share some compliments of some message, some regards from the team members. Ma'am from Jalandhar, Jasmine ma'am, said very useful and practical details have been shared in this session.
Thank you, Jasmine.
And I shared the Rajni sirs already, and a very informative lecture, sir. I think it was a very practical session, like you've already covered, sir. And I think, like you mentioned, that it took you more time in detailing, but I think that was required, sir. And because of your extra 15-20 minutes than the than your expected time, there are very few questions because I think all that has been taken care by you at your end. So I think
Actually, I would like to add here. Actually,
so,
in these type of cases, basically there are issues regarding this court fee, regarding this limitation. I have clarified one by one with the aid of these judgments or the settled law, and then this jurisdiction issues also. But I have left one thing also, and I was expecting questions also that regarding cyber defamation, nobody has asked the question.
okay.
And I'll kept it open, this cyber defamation, and now it is the era of basically cyber defamation.
So,
So I would also like to discuss this in the next topic. So I've only dealt with this practical aspect. I have not gone into the this details how this provision has come into the statute book, why it has come into the statute book. I have only dealt with these practical, this pragmatic aspects of the these topics. So thank you so much.
So, so I think we should thank the audience for being so cooperative, because we started off in the starting and I think there was some technical issue at my end. My audio and my video was not that clear, and we started the session I think 4 to 5 minutes late. So first of all, my apologies, was my fault. So my apologies for the technical issues. But thank you everyone for bearing with us, waiting for us to start the session. Sir, on behalf of the Chandigarh Judicial Academy, on behalf of myself, Chetan Singh Gill, on behalf of SCC Online, I'd like to thank Dr. Gopal Arora sir for taking our time, for preparing the presentation, and for sharing the entire information in such a short span of time and in such a beautiful manner. And sir,
I'm also thankful to all the listeners who have participated in this discussion. And I am again saying I'm not here to teach anything, but I am here to discuss all the things and the problems we are facing. I'm also thankful to my director academic and director admin for giving us this opportunity to discuss these problems with all the judicial officers. And I'm also thankful to all my seniors who have participated in this session, and the lordships who are also participating in these sessions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Sir, thank you so much. And I think that will bring us to the end of this webinar. Thank you for great questions. And sir, would this PPT be available on the?
Yes. I'll send the PPTs as well as the judgments. I have referred.
Okay, so it will be available on the Academy website, sir?
I'll send on their emails.
Okay, so anyone who wants these judgments, like sir has already said, you can get in touch with the Academy and sir can share it on a personal basis, and that can be taken care of. You all know the numbers. You all know that you can reach out to Academy any point of time. On that note, I take your leave. I and with Gopal Arora sir will take your leave, and we'll meet you next week, Wednesday, with a new webinar. Thank you so much.